Hello Year 11. Right, watch this video if you're trying to do your homework this weekend, or you're trying to write a poetry essay and you're struggling with what ideas to write about, struggling with how to come up with linked ideas. I'll just give you some ideas for that and show you how to do it. Okay, so this is our title. Compare the ways that the civilian experience of conflict is presented in At the Border 1979 and one other poem from the anthology. Right, so what is this asking us to do? Civilian experience of conflict. How is the civilian experience of conflict, and not soldiers, presented? Now the first thing I need to do is choose a poem to compare. This doesn't give me a lot of choice, because if I write about bayonet charge, that's not going to work, because that's a soldier and not a civilian in that poem. What else? Charge of the Light Brigade is about soldiers, not civilians. Futility is about soldiers. Mamet's Wood, you could, I suppose, write about the farmers, but it would be tricky, I think. So what poems do have civilians in really clearly? Civilians being people who don't fight. You could write about Out of the Blue, where the guy is trapped on the upper floors of the building of the 9/11, the Twin Towers, and it is the victim of terrorism. Now I'm thinking we could do that, but is there anything in At the Border that's similar? At the Border doesn't really have any violence or fighting, so maybe not do that one. I can't think of a good link. What about Poppies? Poppies is about the experience of a mother who's lost their son. Well, now I'm thinking, okay, At the Border is about a family returning to its homeland, and it also has got a mother in it, so I'm thinking maybe that's going to work, because I can see a link between these two poems, so I'm going to then compare it with Poppies. So the first thing is to choose a poem where you can see a link between them, where there's similarities. You then need to choose your linked ideas, and I'm going to make that my linked idea. So this will be most of my essay. I'll write about this. Both poems show the experience of war for families. Let's look at our title, the civilian experience of conflict. Families, in this case, are civilians. We're not talking about soldiers, so there's the idea that links them and links to the title. It links the poems. Families is in At the Border, and the families in Poppies, and it links to the title because families are civilians. They're not soldiers in this case. Right. Then it's just a matter of thinking, okay, so what am I going to say about each of these things? At the Border, well, okay, so it's about a family returning to its homeland, having been displaced by conflict, like sort of been have migrated because of war that's gone on. So now they're coming home to their country. That's the important thing to understand about that. It's kind of happier and optimistic in tone in some ways. Anyway, they show real joy at returning to their homeland. That's not the only thing that the poem's about, but that does happen. Poppies, on the other hand, what's the families like there? Well, it's very different. It's not a joyful or happy return to their homeland. It's very, very bleak and sombre and depressing and despairing, because it's about the loss of a son and about the mother's experience of the loss of a son. So you'd write your paragraph about At the Border about this bit, and you'd write your paragraph comparing it about this bit. Paragraph there, and try and make the links between these clear. So clearly there's quite a lot of difference here. They both use families, but they both say different things and explore different aspects of that. This is about joyful elements of families returning home. This is about the devastation of the loss of a family member through conflict. Now you'd probably write as much as you can about that. You probably need another point. Another good point might be, I'm thinking, okay, so one thing that's unusual about At the Border is that it's written from a child's point of view. You don't get much poetry about conflict that's written from a child's point of view, so that's unusual. Poppies is also written from a mother's point of view, someone who's not involved in the fighting, which is, there is some poetry about that, but it's also reasonably unusual. So I'm going to make a point of that. Both give points of view that aren't often heard. Quite a good idea. both give points of view that aren't often heard. From At the Border, I'd write about that. It's from a young child's perspective. You give the quotations, you explain why that's important. What does it show? Why is that significant? Well, in this case, it shows that conflict is, we shouldn't say is created by adults because they make artificial divisions between people, like borders. I'll try and make that point, that the point of view here, because they're a young child, and they don't therefore they've got an innocent view. They don't understand that borders are important. So when she sees the thick iron chain, the girl just sort of puts her leg over it and makes a joke out of it, and the adult has to sort of tell her off. It shows us that some of these things that we take very seriously and which lead to conflict, like different countries, different borders, are actually just not real. They're kind of artificial. The poem makes the point that it's the mountains really that provide, that encompass all of us. Anyway, so I'm going to write about that. With Poppies, I'm writing differently then about how it's the point of view of a mother who's lost a son, and how that shows us the real grief that she feels. So that's all I'm going to say there. We've thought about what the question is, thought exactly about the question. We've thought about one poem and thought, okay, what fits with that poem? What fits with the title and the poem that we've thought? So we need one that's about civilians. We need one that fits with At the Border. We've gone for Poppies, and we've got two linked ideas that we're going to write about. One is that they both show the experience of war, and one is that they both give points of view that aren't if often heard. You could phrase that as the poems give different points of view. If you wanted to, that would work just as well, because it doesn't have to be something that they both do in your linked idea. Right, all the best with that piece of work then. Off you go.